The first thing the Alpha King noticed was her smile. The second things he noticed was that she wasn't wearing his mark anymore. The third thing, the thing that would eventually destroy his composure, he completely missed. A little boy crashed into her legs. "Mom!" The child wrapped both arms around her waist. Aurelia laughed, a real laugh, the kind Kaelin Draven had not heard in years. She bent down and lifted the boy effortlessly. The child immediately buried his face against her shoulder. Comfortable, safe, loved. Around them, the Harbor Summit marketplace continued moving as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Merchants shouted from colorful stalls. Children raced through crowded streets. Ships swayed gently beyond the harbor. Trade representatives from dozens of territories filled the city. Life continued, and Tanzania's less than 20 feet away. The Alpha King never looked twice at the child, because he was too busy staring at the woman he had lost. 5 years since Aurelia Vale vanished from the royal palace. 5 years since she disappeared before sunrise without a goodbye. 5 years since he watched her ride beyond the kingdom gates and out of his life. And now she stood before him again, alive, healthy, beautiful, smiling. The sight felt strangely unreal, because for years, Kaelin imagined this moment differently. In every version, she looked angry, or sad, or disappointed. Something. Instead, she looked peaceful. The realization unsettled him immediately, because peace suggested healing, and healing suggested she no longer needed him. The thought bothered him more than it should have. The little boy lifted his head from Aurelia's shoulder. Dark hair, bright silver eyes, an easy smile. He looked curiously toward the crowd before settling comfortably against her again. Still, Kaelin barely noticed. His attention remained fixed on Aurelia, always Aurelia, as though the last 5 years had collapsed into seconds. Finally, she looked up. Their eyes met, and the smile vanished. Not completely, just enough. Enough for him to know she recognized him immediately. Silence settled between them, heavy, complicated. The marketplace noise suddenly felt distant. Neither moved, neither spoke. Then the little boy tugged gently on Aurelia's sleeve. "Mom?" The simple word broke the moment. Aurelia glanced down automatically. "What is it?" The child pointed excitedly toward the harbor. "Can we go see the ships now?" His enthusiasm made her smile again. A smaller smile, softer, warmer. The sort of smile reserved for someone precious. Kaelin watched the interaction. Yet somehow, he still failed to see it. Failed to notice the similarities. Failed to ask the obvious questions. Failed to recognize the impossible standing directly beside her. Because sometimes fate places the truth in front of you, and people refuse to look. Finally, Kaelin stepped forward, slowly, carefully, like a man approaching a ghost. "Aurelia." His voice sounded rougher than he intended, older, tired. For a moment, she simply stared at him. Then the little boy looked between them curiously, and asked the question that would change everything. "Mom, who's that?" 5 years earlier, Aurelia Vale had not left because she stopped loving the Alpha King. She left because she finally realized love wasn't enough. That was the part nobody understood. The kingdom believed she had everything. The king's trust, the people's admiration, a future Luna's position. Whenever nobles discussed the future, they spoke about Aurelia as though her place beside the throne was already guaranteed. No one questioned it, not even Aurelia, at least not in the beginning. For years, she stood beside Kaelin through political crises, trade negotiations, and border disputes. Whenever problems arose, she helped solve them. Whenever tensions appeared, she helped smooth them away. The kingdom praised the Alpha King. Aurelia quietly ensured he succeeded, and for a long time, that was enough, because she loved him. The problem with love is that sometimes it convinces you to ignore things that should concern you. Things like distance, things like silence, things like longing. Then Seraphine Thorncrest returned, the Alpha King's first love, the woman who once nearly became his mate. Years earlier, Seraphine left the kingdom unexpectedly. The relationship ended. Life moved forward, or at least Aurelia believed it had. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Seraphine attended court functions. Kaelin welcomed her politely. The kingdom viewed her return as little more than interesting gossip. Then, small things began appearing. Lingering conversations, shared memories, private jokes nobody else understood. The sort of moments easy to dismiss individually, difficult to ignore collectively. Aurelia noticed them immediately. Not because she was jealous, because she was paying attention. More importantly, she noticed something else. The way Kaelin looked at Seraphine. Not often, not constantly. Just enough. Enough to make old questions feel uncomfortably alive. Every time doubt appeared, Aurelia pushed it away. Until the royal gathering. Until the conversations she was never meant to hear. The evening had nearly ended. Most guests were already leaving. Aurelia crossed the western gallery, carrying several documents when voices drifted through an open chamber door. One voice belonged to Kaelin. The other belonged to a senior advisor. She wasn't eavesdropping, at least not intentionally. Then she heard the question. If Seraphine had stayed all those years ago, would you have married her? Silence followed. A long silence. The kind that reveals more than words ever could. Aurelia stopped walking. Her heartbeat quickened. Inside the room, someone laughed softly. Then Kaelin answered, probably. One word, one honest word, one fatal word. The documents nearly slipped from Aurelia's hands. Because suddenly everything made sense. The conversations, the smiles, the memories, the distance she never wanted to acknowledge. And most painfully, the uncertainty. You cannot compete with a fantasy. You cannot compete with a past someone still romanticizes. And you certainly cannot build a future with someone who still wonders about another one. That night, Aurelia packed her belongings. Before sunrise, she would leave the palace. But fate had one final surprise waiting. Because 3 weeks later, far beyond the kingdom's borders, Aurelia discovered she wasn't leaving alone. At first, Aurelia thought she was ill. The journey had been exhausting. She barely slept, barely ate. The stress of leaving her entire life behind weighed heavily on her. So when the dizziness started, she ignored it. When the exhaustion worsened, she blamed travel. When the healer smiled knowingly, Aurelia felt confusion before understanding. Then everything changed. Congratulations. The older woman folded her hands. You're expecting. Silence. Complete silence. Aurelia stared. The words refused to settle. Expecting. Pregnant. A child. Kaelin's child. The realization hit all at once. Powerful. Terrifying. Beautiful. For several minutes, she simply sat there. One hand resting against her stomach, trying to imagine a future she had never planned, a future she now carried with her. That night, she wrote a letter, then destroyed it. The next day, she wrote another, then destroyed that one too. A third followed, the same result, because every version ended the same way. Kaelin would come, of that she had no doubt, not because he loved her enough, because he was honorable enough, responsible enough. Duty would bring him, obligation would keep him. And Aurelia refused to build a family on obligation. The truth hurt, but not enough to change her decision. So she kept the secret and kept moving forward. The first year was the hardest. She settled in a coastal territory several kingdoms away, far enough that nobody recognized her, far enough that memories lost their sharp edges. Work filled her days, pregnancy filled her nights, fear filled the spaces between. Then Cassian arrived, and everything changed. The moment she held him, the loneliness felt smaller. Not gone, just smaller. His tiny fingers wrapped around hers, his silver eyes opened weeks later, and for a moment, Aurelia nearly laughed. Because he looked exactly like his father. The resemblance only grew stronger with time. The same dark hair, the same stubborn expression, the same crooked smile. Every year made it more obvious, and every year strengthened her certainty. She had made the right choice. Not because life was easy. It wasn't. There were fevers, sleepless nights, financial struggles, moments of overwhelming exhaustion, moments when she desperately wished she had help. Yet through all of it, one thing remained true. Cassian never doubted he was loved, never questioned his place, never wondered whether he was someone's second choice. Aurelia made certain of that. Years passed, the pain faded. The life she built became real. She established trade networks, earned respect, created stability. The kingdom she left behind gradually transformed into memory, not forgotten, just distant. Then came the Harbor Summit. Representatives from dozens of territories gathered for trade negotiations. Aurelia attended as a respected delegate. Nothing more, nothing less. She expected meetings, contracts, political discussions. She did not expect fate. Because 5 years after leaving the Alpha King behind, Aurelia stepped into a crowded marketplace, looked across the street, and saw Kaelin Draven staring directly at her, while their son stood beside her completely unnoticed. For several seconds, nobody moved. The marketplace continued around them. Merchants negotiated prices. Sailors unloaded cargo. Children chased one another between crowded stalls. Yet for Aurelia, the world had narrowed to a single pair of familiar eyes. Kaelin looked older, not dramatically, just enough. The kind of change responsibility creates. The kind that comes from carrying a kingdom on your shoulders. His hair was slightly shorter than she remembered. His expression more serious, more guarded. But he was still unmistakably Kaelin, the man she once planned to spend her life beside, the man she left before sunrise 5 years ago, and standing beside her, their son, completely unaware of the storm unfolding around him. "Mom, who's that?" Cassian's question lingered in the air. Aurelia felt her heart tighten, not because she feared the answer, because of how absurd the situation felt. The child asking about his father, the father standing only a few feet away, and somehow neither knew the truth. For a brief moment, she considered telling him. Then common sense returned. Not here, not in a crowded marketplace, not in front of strangers, not without preparation. So she smiled gently. An old friend. Cassian accepted the answer immediately. Children often do. Oh, the boy nodded, satisfied. Then wandered toward a nearby display of carved wooden ships. His attention shifted instantly. Aurelia envied that ability. Across from her, Kaelin finally found his voice. Aurelia, the way he said her name surprised her. Softly, carefully, like something fragile. Your Majesty. The formal response escaped automatically. The slight flinch that crossed his face did not go unnoticed. For years, she imagined this reunion. Anger, closure, resentment, some dramatic emotional confrontation. Instead, she felt mostly tired, not exhausted, just aware of how much time had passed. 5 years changes people. 5 years changes feelings. 5 years changes expectations. For several moments, neither knew what to say. Eventually, Kaelin spoke. You disappeared. Aurelia nearly laughed. Not because the statement was wrong, because it was such a Kaelin thing to say. Direct, blunt. Focused on facts instead of reasons. I left. The correction came quietly. His expression tightened slightly. The distinction mattered. They both knew it. One suggested mystery. The other suggested choice. Silence followed. Long, complicated. Nearby, Cassian proudly held up a carved ship. Mom, look at this one. Aurelia smiled automatically. It's beautiful. The little boy beamed, then returned to studying the display. Kaelin watched the interaction, yet somehow he still didn't see it. The resemblance, the silver eyes, the dark hair, the familiar smile. Everything stood directly in front of him. Obvious, impossible to miss. Except he wasn't looking. Not really. His attention remained fixed on Aurelia, the woman he lost, the woman he never stopped wondering about. And somehow that hurt more than if he had noticed immediately. Because once again, he was looking at her, while failing to see what mattered most. Eventually, the conversation ended. Polite words, careful distance. Nothing resolved, nothing explained. As Kaelin walked away through the crowded marketplace, he carried only one certainty. Seeing Aurelia again had changed something. What he didn't realize was that the biggest change wasn't Aurelia. It was the little boy he never truly looked at. Kaelin could not stop thinking about her. The realization irritated him. He was an Alpha King, a ruler, a strategist. a man responsible for an entire kingdom. Yet after one brief conversation in a crowded marketplace, his thoughts kept returning to Aurelia. Not the woman she used to be, the woman she had become. She looked different, not physically, at least not much. The difference lived somewhere deeper, in her posture, in her smile, in the quiet confidence she carried. 5 years ago, Aurelia often seemed burdened, not unhappy, just tired, like someone carrying responsibilities nobody else noticed. The woman he saw at the harbor summit looked lighter, as though she had finally set those burdens down. The thought followed him throughout the afternoon, then into the evening, then into the diplomatic dinner hosted inside the harbor governor's estate. The gathering should have demanded his full attention. Trade negotiations, regional alliances, political discussions, important matters. Instead, he found himself staring into a glass of wine while replaying a conversation that lasted less than 10 minutes. You disappeared. I left. The distinction still bothered him, because she was right. She hadn't vanished. She chose to go. And for the first time in years, Kalen found himself wondering what his life might have looked like if she had stayed. The irony wasn't lost on him. 5 years earlier, he wondered about another future. Now he was wondering about the one he lost. A voice interrupted his thoughts. A remarkable woman. Kalen looked up. A trade representative sat across from him. Older, friendly, clearly speaking about someone specific. Who? The man smiled. Lady Aurelia. Immediately, Kalen became attentive. The representative continued. Building a trade network across 3 coastal territories would be impressive enough. Several guests nodded. Then the man laughed softly. Doing it while raising a son alone is extraordinary. Silence. The words echoed inside Kalen's mind. A son. His hand tightened slightly around his glass. What did you say? The representative blinked, apparently surprised by the question. Aurelia's son. The room continued talking around them. Nobody noticed the shift. Nobody noticed the sudden stillness in the Alpha King's expression. But inside Kalen's head, everything stopped. A son. The phrase repeated endlessly. 5 years. Aurelia left 5 years ago. The little boy looked around 5 years old. Dark hair, silver eyes, a familiar smile. The marketplace flashed through his memory. The child crashing into her legs. The child calling her mom. The child asking who he was. A cold feeling spread through his chest. Slow, relentless, impossible to ignore. No. The word escaped quietly, almost involuntarily. The representative frowned. Your Majesty? Kalen barely heard him, because suddenly he was calculating dates, weeks, months, years. Every detail slammed together with terrifying precision. The timing fit perfectly, too perfectly. His pulse quickened, the silver eyes, the dark hair, the resemblance he never bothered to examine. The resemblance standing directly in front of him while he stared at Aurelia. Fear settled into his chest. Real fear, not fear of war, not fear of failure. Fear of realization, because for the first time, a horrifying possibility entered his mind. And deep down, he already knew it was true. Kalen barely remembered how the dinner ended. One moment he sat among diplomats and trade representatives. The next, he was walking alone through the harbor district. The night air felt colder than before. Or perhaps that was simply fear, because the possibility now lodged inside his mind refused to leave. A son. The words echoed relentlessly. Aurelia's son, 5 years old. The same amount of time she had been gone. The timing fit too perfectly. And suddenly, Kalen found himself replaying every detail from the marketplace. Not Aurelia, the boy. For the first time, he forced himself to remember. Dark hair, bright silver eyes, the crooked smile, the confident way he moved, the way he wrapped himself around Aurelia without hesitation. The resemblance now seemed absurdly obvious. How had he missed it? The answer came immediately. Because he wasn't looking. Not at the child. Not really. He had spent 5 years mourning the woman he lost. Then fate placed her directly in front of him, and he focused on nothing else. The realization felt humiliating and terrifying. The following morning, Kalen started asking questions, carefully, discreetly. not because he wanted secrecy, because he wasn't ready for confirmation. Several summit officials knew Aurelia. Most spoke highly of her. The answers remained consistent: respected, intelligent, hardworking, successful. Then came the details he was actually searching for. Yes, she had a son. Yes, she raised him alone. Yes, the child's name was Cassian. And yes, he was 5 years old. Every answer tightened something inside Kalen's chest. The evidence kept building, one piece at a time, until denial became difficult, then impossible. By afternoon, he found himself staring at residency records, trade registrations, travel documents, nothing private, nothing inappropriate, just enough information to confirm timelines, and the timelines aligned perfectly. Aurelia left. 3 weeks later, she vanished from public records. Several months after that, she appeared in the coastal territories, pregnant. The room suddenly felt smaller, because there was no longer room for coincidence, only truth. A truth he somehow failed to see standing directly beside him. Kalen closed the file, then sat motionless for several minutes. 5 years, 5 birthdays, 5 winters, 5 summers, 5 years of a child's life. Gone, not stolen, not hidden, missed. The realization hurt more than he expected, because until now the loss had always been Aurelia. Now the loss had a face, a voice, a name: Cassian, his son. The thought felt unreal, yet every instinct told him it was true. As sunset approached, another realization arrived. Aurelia would not remain at the harbor summit forever. The event ended tomorrow. Soon she would leave again. And this time, Kalen knew exactly what he stood to lose. Not a memory, not a possibility, a son. The Alpha King rose so quickly, his chair nearly toppled behind him. For the first time in years, panic outweighed pride. Because there was only one thing left to do. He needed to find Aurelia, immediately, before fate gave him a second chance, and he missed it again. Kalen found them at sunrise. The harbor remained quiet at that hour. Most merchants had not opened their stalls yet. Fishing boats drifted lazily across the water. Seagulls circled overhead. The world felt peaceful. Far too peaceful for the storm inside his chest. From a distance, he spotted them sitting at the end of an old wooden dock. Aurelia, and the little boy, Cassian, his son. The words still felt unreal. The child sat cross-legged near the edge of the dock, tossing breadcrumbs into the water. Every few moments, a seagull swooped down to steal a piece. Each success earned delighted laughter. The sound reached Kalen before he reached them. Bright, carefree, familiar, painfully familiar. For 5 years, those moments existed without him. 5 years of laughter. 5 years of stories. 5 years of memories, all gone. Not because anyone stole them, because he wasn't there. Aurelia noticed him first. Of course she did. She always noticed things first. Her posture stiffened slightly. Not fear, not surprise. Recognition, understanding. Because one look at his face told her everything. He knew, or at least suspected. The little boy turned next, curious, open, completely unaware of the significance of the moment. Kalen stopped several feet away. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. The silence felt different from the marketplace. Heavier, more honest, because now he was actually looking. Really looking. And once he did, the resemblance became possible to ignore. The silver eyes, his eyes, the dark hair, his family's hair. Even the shape of the boy's smile felt familiar. Every feature screamed the same truth. How had he missed it? The answer embarrassed him. Because he had been staring at Aurelia while the truth stood beside her. The child tilted his head, studying the stranger, then smiled politely. The exact same crooked smile Kalen saw every morning in the mirror. The sight nearly shattered him. The first time in years, the Alpha King felt completely powerless. Not because of an enemy, not because of politics, because of a little boy feeding birds. Eventually, Kalen found his voice, though it barely sounded like his own. He's mine. Not a question. Not really. A realization, a confession, a truth arriving far too late. Aurelia looked out toward the ocean. The morning sunlight reflected across the water. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded, once, yes. The simplicity of the answer hurt. Because she wasn't angry, wasn't defensive, wasn't trying to punish him. She was simply telling the truth. The same truth she had carried alone for 5 years. Cassian looked between them, confused now. His small forehead wrinkled. Mom? Aurelia reached out and gently rested a hand on his shoulder. The gesture seemed instinctive, protective, loving. Then she took a slow breath and spoke the words neither of them could avoid any longer. The little boy looked up. Aurelia's voice softened. This is your father. The harbor fell completely silent. The harbor seemed to stop breathing. Even the seagulls felt quieter, the waves gentler, the world smaller. Cassian stared at Kaelin. Kaelin stared at Cassian. Neither knew what to say, because some truths arrive all at once. Too large, too important, too life-changing to understand immediately. The little boy blinked, then looked at Aurelia. He's my father? His voice carried confusion. Curiosity, nothing else. No anger, no resentment. Children don't mourn years they never knew existed. Adults do. Aurelia nodded gently. Yes. Cassian looked back at Kaelin, studying him more carefully now. The silver eyes, the same eyes Kaelin saw every morning in his mirror. The resemblance no longer felt subtle. It felt overwhelming. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the little boy asked the question only a child would ask. Why didn't I meet him before? The words landed like a blade. Simple, innocent, devastating. Aurelia lowered her gaze briefly. Kaelin closed his eyes, because there was no answer capable of satisfying a child. No explanation simple enough. No truth painless enough. Eventually, Aurelia spoke softly. Sometimes adults make complicated mistakes. Cassian considered that, then nodded, apparently satisfied. The simplicity almost made Kaelin laugh, or cry. He wasn't sure which, because adults spend years destroying things, and children often accept explanations in seconds. The unfairness of it felt unbearable. The little boy returned his attention to the water. Another bird landed nearby. Another breadcrumb disappeared. Life moved forward, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Yet Kaelin felt as though his entire world had shifted. 5 years. The number repeated endlessly inside his mind. 5 birthdays, 5 winters, 5 summers, 5 years of memories, gone. He imagined first steps, first words, first scraped knees, nightmares, laughter, stories before bed, moments fathers are supposed to witness, moments he never would. Not because Aurelia stole them, because time did, and time never gives anything back. Finally, Kaelin looked at her. Why didn't you tell me? The question emerged quietly, not accusing, not angry. Broken, Aurelia watched the ocean. The answer clearly lived inside her already. I almost did. The confession surprised him. She smiled faintly, without humor. I wrote 3 letters, silence. Then, I destroyed all of them. Kaelin's chest tightened, because somehow that hurt more than if she had never considered it. Aurelia folded her hands. When I left, I didn't stop loving you. The honesty caught him off guard. But I stopped trusting the future. The harbor grew very quiet. I knew you would have come back. Kaelin immediately nodded. Of course I would have, I know. The answer arrived instantly, certain, painful. That's why I didn't send them. He frowned. Aurelia finally met his gaze. I didn't want duty. The words settled heavily between them. I didn't want obligation. Another pause. I wanted certainty. The same certainty he failed to give her 5 years ago. The same certainty that sent her away. And standing on that dock beside the son he never knew existed, Kaelin realized the hardest truth of all. Aurelia hadn't taken his child from him. She had protected her child from uncertainty. And now he faced a question more frightening than any war. Could 5 lost years ever be repaired?